Okay guys, we're back in the garage this morning and I would like to do a video talking about getting my Porsche 911 3.2 Carrera operating properly. It was a 1986 car. I don't have it anymore. I sold it. And I had two of them. I had a red one and I had a burgundy one. So you might see that in the pictures on this presentation. One thing I noticed driving it was the car was really strong above 3,000 RPM. But then below, 60 miles an hour, the car was really hunting, like it was too rich or didn't have enough air. It was really hesitating at lower RPMs. Okay, to start with, I completely Varsol washed the engine so I could see and inspect it properly. One thing I noticed was that firewall insulation material was starting to fall down. So I took it off and removed the falling down pieces. You can see it there on the top of the picture. So that was a big job to scrape all that crap off and clean up everything. If you don't do it, it'll end up getting these tufts of material, little tufts and material pieces of insulation will end up in your air filter box. The next thing I did is I removed the idle stabilizer valve. You see it there in the picture. And took it out, cleaned it properly with brake cleaner. And wow, what a bunch of carbon and garbage came out of that. So that, I think, helped a lot. The next thing I did is I adjusted the idle cutoff switch. And there's a lot of information in the manual or online about how to do it, but there it is behind the throttle body. It's a little switch that basically tells the DME computer that you're off the throttle, that the throttle's in the idle position, and trips a little micro switch there, and then sends a signal to the ECU that, hey, you're in the idle mode of operation, so it schedules the fuel accordingly to hold the RPM, which I think is, if I remember correctly, was 800 RPM. Here's a picture that shows where the adjustments are made. In the middle of the throttle body, you'll see a rubber boot, okay, on top of the throttle body. And then what you want to do is remove that where you see the red arrow on the picture. And there's an air passage there where the red line is on the picture. Okay, that's where the bypass screw gets its air from to raise the idle. As you back out the screw, it allows more air in under the throttle plate. Okay, and the pick has the idle screw removed that you adjust. Okay, so there's a screw there and you can adjust it. This pick shows the idle speed adjustment screw with a yellow around the screw, and then there's another idle switch adjustment screws for the switch that we talked about earlier. It's on the left. I had to adjust mine a little bit to increase it to get some more air through the intake. Follow the idle speed adjustment procedure shown here. Shown in this picture is the emissions vacuum system for the 3.2 liter 911, and it's of course very complicated, and there's the potential for many leaks, many vacuum leaks. So you'll have to start checking all your vacuum hoses that are shown in these pictures where to look, and make sure that you don't have any hoses that are split or pinholes. I replaced hose clamps and vacuum lines. A good source is Pelican Parts to buy these. And so it's a lot of work, but you got to track it down and make sure you got no vacuum leaks. And your car will run a lot smoother. One thing you can do too is splice in a vacuum gauge at the fuel pressure regulator and see how your vacuum's doing. This could be very helpful to show if you have a problem or if the vacuum's normal. You can tee it in there between the rubber hose that comes off the fuel pressure regulator and the small air tube that goes in, and you put a T at that point to your vacuum gauge. I replaced the fuel pressure regulator with a new unit, and also the fuel pressure damper on the right hand side as well. Also, I found a crack in the rubber bellows between the airflow meter and the throttle body. So that's a hairline crack next to one of the little plastic ribs that are a part of it, and that's important that it's not leaking there, because you're going to get a false reading at the airflow meter. Airflow meter reads too low in that case. So I replaced the bellows. In the 911, the crankcase is vented to the oil tank, and there's a return line from the tank, as well as an auxiliary vent line controlled by a vacuum switching valve and a vacuum control for the auxiliary vent, which is nothing more than a PCV valve, as it were in other vehicles. So I provided the part number and a picture of it, so you can just go to your local auto parts store and get one on the cheap. All of these hoses and vent lines are cause for concern in terms of vacuum leaks and should be thoroughly inspected. As you work through it, you can check your progress again by hooking up the vacuum gauge and see how you did, if you made improvements using this chart here. If your vacuum's reading low, like below 17 inches of mercury, the things you can check for are timing issues, ignition problems, again, vacuum leaks, and we've covered that off. A fluctuating needle can point to a burnt valve or sticking valves in the cylinder head, so do a compression check. Or it could be caused by vacuum leaks. We talked about that quite a bit today. Also, low vacuum pressure can be caused by valve timing issues. So please check my other video I have on how to check your valve timing. Also, if you have low vacuum pressure, you got to check for leaks at the intake manifold gaskets. Here you can see a 3.2 engine on build in my shop, and you can see that the intakes have very long studs on there, which basically there's a gasket at the cylinder head, then there's an intermediate flange, and then another gasket, and then the aluminum intake manifold flange sitting on top, all with a nut, with a washer and a nut, and it's all sandwiched together. So you got to make sure those gaskets are good. Okay, a word about ignition coils. Be careful not to just slap on any old coil on the 3.2 with a Motronic system. The correct coil has very little inductance, because the coil is triggered by a transistor that's inside the ECU, which means that the, the engine computer is actually driving the coil, and it can get hot. Therefore, the resistance is set really low on the ignition coil on the 3.2 liter engine, because you don't want to load up the ECU with high resistance to overheat the Motronic unit, and you can burn out the whole entire computer, which isn't great for the longevity of the control unit, which is probably why the factory, the Porsche factory, and Bosch started using external coil drivers with the 964 and the 993 models. You know, you don't really want your Motronic unit doing all that work internally, because they do burn out, and that's a big problem. So make sure you got the right coil installed. I'll put a picture of it here. Okay, one last thing I'll leave you with before you go out there and go crazy on your 3.2. Here is a picture of a cylinder head temperature sensor, and it's like a thermocouple probe, really, that measures the temperature of the cylinder head, obviously. And it has like a two-wire system, a Lumel and Chromel terminal, and a plastic sheath, like wire, and it's easy to pinch or break those wires if you're not careful, or if mechanics are not careful. And once they're broken, or if the unit is disconnected, the engine will go to a full rich condition, as if it was super cold outside. And you know, it'll cause backfiring through the exhaust at idle, and then problems that, you know, when you lift your foot off the throttle in an off idle condition, all of a sudden go onto the idle switch on the throttle body, you know, you can have some good backfires there too. So, you know, also, if it if the sensor slowly starts to wear out and degrade, the resistance values across the board are going to decrease. And when that happens, the whole operation range starts to richen up. Okay, so that's another thing you want to check. I'll leave a table here for you to look at. And you can check that with your meter and see if you're okay. Remember, guys, that a lean backfires through the exhaust and a rich backfires through the intake. All right, guys, do check out some of my other videos on YouTube, and please leave us a like if you like the content, if you found it helpful, maybe to you in your project, 3.2 liter. And as I said in the other videos, I'm a longtime car guy, a retired Air Canada jet engine specialist, and when I lived in Thunder Bay for many years and ran a small shop there working on Porsche cars, because nobody else did up there. I was the only kind of like, there was two guys in the whole town that did Porsches back then, air-cooled cars, and did a lot of work on Volkswagen Beetles, all air-cooled stuff as well, and own 5 911s personally. So I've been around them for a little while, and if you can think of any other questions you might have, just put them down in the comments and I'll see if I can respond. Okay, I hope you liked the video. Leave us a like, and thanks for watching.